I'm Michael Sean Harris, and you're listening to Mike's Moment of, a weekly podcast in which I, along with my guests, share our various interests in moments of inspiration, truth, life, technology, culture, and more. I hope you're entertained and informed, and that you feel inspired to join me again and again in my moments of. Okay, all right, Peter. Hi, welcome back. This is Mike's Moment of, and what we can call this reggae history. It's more than reggae history, but you know, we'll get some people up in arms. The last time I spoke to you, you know, we had said yes, we'll get you back here to talk about some of the revisionist things that you know you've heard and stuff with the history of the Jamaican music.
Yeah.
So let's start, quote unquote, the beginning, the pop music beginning, the ska. Where did ska originate? I mean, what I've heard is there's like an uptown version of ska, and then there was a real ska. Well, I don't even know if I'm using the right words, but yeah, you tell me.
You know, I'm not absolutely sure if there was a live version of ska. You know, I don't think the Scatolites fellows were like playing it live, and then it went into the studio. I think it started in the studio.
Really?
That's what I think. I should really do some research and find out. But I think I think it is a studio. My thing of it is that it's a studio creation, because those people didn't. It was a genuine studio band where people were coming from various other groups, and forming in the studio, if I remember correctly.
So who did that start with? Like who was the producer or the engineer that was starting that kind of stuff?
No, the engineer, as far as I understand, it was Coxon was the original engineer for those kind of things, and then it was Morris, Sylvan Morris,
What studio was that?
at the Brentford Road studio. The
Okay.
It started there, and he started with um, it's written down. The equipment he started with was one of those, like a tube mixer and one track machine. Yeah, I think so, because the how did it go? The Stanley motor had the first studio, right? And
Okay.
Stanley Motor did I think did these recordings, and those recordings were direct to disc. You know, there were no tape recorders those days.
Okay.
Well, tape recorders hadn't reached Jamaica yet. They're
Okay.
reasonably new. Remember, the first tape recorder that this side of the world knew about was when the Americans ended up in Berlin,
Right.
yeah, and found this strange contraption that the
Mm-hmm.
Germans had developed. Before that, there were wire recorders and wax cylinders, those crazy things, and phonographs, the discs. But the tape recorders took a little while, and I think the original recordings were direct to disc. And what they did was they cut it and then they sent that to England, and they made a mother out of that. And from the mother, they made a master stamper, and then they used the master to
Okay.
stamp out the records.
So who were some of the iconic players? I mean, the musicians
No, well, the
from.
players are the it was the sort of band lead, wasn't it? Roland Alfonso,
Okay.
So, and but the you know, Alfonso was a sax player, you know, sax player, but the rhythm players were, you know, Lloyd Knibb and Brevet on the bass, Lloyd Brevet,
Hmm.
and I think it was Jajeri that played guitar originally. Um, you know, so later on it was Freighter, um, and what his name, Jackie Matu was on piano,
Hmm.
and then you know there was Tommy McCook, who was the trumpet player. Oh gosh, you sprung this on me, you know. It was Tommy McCook, and Don Drummond, of course. Those were that was
Trombone.
the yes, trombone. The the famous Don Drummond. You know, you always have those icons. You know. Don Drummond was quite a character. All right. I'm sorry, I'm so vague about this. Um, I'm scraping. No, you know. But whatever it was, the those the scat developed out of covering boogie woogie. Yeah,
Okay.
the
Hmm.
oompa 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 oompa. You know that it is said that Coxsone, you know, was looking for a substitute for the records that he used to get. He used to
Okay.
records for his sounds, for his sound system.
Right.
And then when the ship, you know, the war had ended, the World War had ended, so the ships no longer came. I think they came once a month or something like that. And he would and they would people he would bring these records. They would bring these records from New Orleans, I think.
Okay.
And this is how he got his supply of the American rhythm and blues. It was a kind of thing where uptown Jamaica was sort of, you know, like the English tastes and the American tastes, you
Okay.
know, classical music, semi-classical music, and the pop music was the basically the, you know, the Pat Boone, the Connie Francis.
Hmm. The crooners and
Yes, yes, those the white people, and the downtown, like the rhythm and blues stuff, you know, well preferred, I would say, I should say. Not that they didn't know anything about that, the other stuff, the regular pop stuff,
right.
but they certainly preferred the rhythm and blues, the Fats Dominoes, and that kind of stuff. And the recordings started off as boogie woogie, those shuffle things, the boogie woogie covers. And if you listen to the
Okay.
early things with who is it, Snapping
Easy snapping and stuff.
yeah, yeah, that, you know, the ba ba dee ba dee bit ba dee ba dee ba dee dee ba dee ba dee ba dee ba dee 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 doo be ba dee bit, you know.
Yeah, they
And
had the swing. Yeah.
yes, it's shuffle, and it's a blues chord
Right.
progression. So it was that, and somewhere along the line with doing these things, it that shuffle beat, that oompa 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 suddenly it straightened out, oompa 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 oompa, right? And the accent became not one and three, it became two and four, or
Okay.
yeah, somewhere along the line it got kind of just got turned around. Yeah, the thing that starts to set ska apart from boogie woogie is the straightening up of the basic lilt, you know, the tang ta tang ta tang ta tang
The
becomes ta
accents.
ta 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 ta,
Mm.
right? And from then it was, you know, the little details of the accent, you know, this heavy accent on the so-called weak beat, you know.
Right.
So whereas Western music says it's the first beat and the third beat that you accent,
Right.
right? Then with ska it becomes the second beat and the fourth beat. You know, it's and in some ways that to me is the catch, the famous catch that reggae has in its bass lines. You know, where there's nothing on the first beat
Mm-hmm.
and the bass comes in later. You know, the line starts later than the first beat.
Right.
And I used to be thinking, you know, where would this catch from? And then it suddenly occurred to me one day that the famous one drop, which is
Mm-hmm.
on the weak beat, is another catch. It's another delaying of the accent. It's the
Okay.
first beat, the accented first beat being moved to the second beat. It's just another catch.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, well, that's one way to look at it. I think.
Well, yeah, I guess it's one way. I mean, it's similar like in some Latin music, where they have the clave and the stuff is arranged around that
Yes,
clave, even if
clave
it
is the
if it
center
isn't
of the
played there.
band. Yes.
Right. Right. So this idea of the catch is what kind of anchors everything else.
Yeah, but one thing though, as the Scatolites played it, you know, the way the Scatolites played it, the each instrument had its own riff, you know, its basic role inside the rhythm.
Explain that.
Well, the guitar had this what you call it, eighth note offbeat. In other words,
Mm.
2, 3, 4, pa 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 pa
Okay.
pa, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's playing on the off eighth note of each beat. Then, if you want to think of it
Okay.
that way, and the piano did a sort of version of that, right? And the bass played at that time for ska was a walking bass most of the time, a walking bass. It was still the walking bass of the boogie woogie
Boogie
tune.
woogie.
Yeah,
Okay.
the doom 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 doom. Although Lloyd Brevet was a bit of a character, and I think, all right, let me get to that later. He would play the bass line, and partly I think because the Scatolites were paid by the song they by the piece, by the song. They weren't paid by the hour or
Oh.
by the day. They were paid by the song.
Okay.
So it became paramount that you did as many songs as possible.
Okay.
So and this became the standard throughout the whole of that the halcyon days of the recording industry, where you are playing, you're hired, you know, to play this session for this producer, and you want to get through as many songs as possible because the more songs you do, the more money you make.
Okay.
So when you've done a recording and there's playback going on, if there are mistakes in there, you try and ignore them because you want to go to the next song.
Right. Right.
This is aside from the fact of different, you know, um, let's say, little more relaxed production values in those days. You know, those are
Mm-hmm.
the 1960s. You know, the production values. I think of them as being different, not necessarily sloppy, but different. You know, we weren't as obsessed with perfection as we are nowadays. You know,
Right.
the I think the performance was more the desired goal, and the details were, you know, sometimes overlooked, and especially in the case of in Jamaica, where the musicians, maybe their standards were, you know, variable, shall we say, and a lot of the
Okay. Yeah.
producers didn't know what they were listening to anyway, so they couldn't tell
Right.
either way.
So who was doing the arrangements for those scatoons? Was it people
I
that?
I am told the band leader was Roland Alfonso,
Okay.
the Cuban, right? And it sounds to me though that it's a kind of um, band, a sort of band arrangement, so what the Americans call the head arrangement,
Right.
where you just take care of your part,
Right.
and
Right.
if you have any bright ideas, you shout them out,
Okay.
and so everybody comes up with his his part, and because ska, that whole ska and reggae thing is a formula, it's a rhythm formula, and you
Mm-hmm.
put stuff over that. So the horn players would go off and work out their what they were going to play, and if there was any harmony, they work that out. And on
Right.
the rhythm side, now they just work out um, they knew what they had to play. The guitar is playing the ska, piano is
Mm-hmm.
playing the ska, you know,
Okay.
and Nib, Lloyd Nib. I didn't mention this a while ago. The sort of basic one drop beat that ska seemed to become, that wasn't what Lloyd Nib played.
What was he playing?
The one drop, he was free forming throughout the whole thing.
Okay.
If you listen to those ska things, the person who is enjoying it most is Nib. This stuff he's going, no, you must
Lots
listen
of
to it.
fills and lots of rolls and
No, it's just it's like a very rhythmic drum solo going on in there. And
okay.
this in chip bap chip
Mm-hmm.
bap chip kind of thing that you hear any Jamaican drummer. You say ska and he'll play that.
Right.
But that is a pattern that was a sort of averaging out of the essence of the ska beat on the drums
Okay.
that Byron Lee and the rest of the bands that the bands that followed, caught on with it, got with the program and did the ska was the big thing. So everybody played ska, and
Right.
what the drummers ended up playing was that that thing, which was the sort of what you call it, distillation of what
Mm-hmm.
was going on. What Lloyd Nib was playing is like a drum solo in there. You should hear what if you listen to it. And this is where a lot of the propulsion of the scatolites comes from. The scatolites, I marvel at it, because when I was a schoolboy and we're hearing these things, one of the things some of us, in we were a little more interested in music than just I like this and I don't like this, or we were a
Mm-hmm.
little more interested than that. We were a little more analytical. People tended to be a little more analytical those days. Um, and we would listen to it, and some of us would find it hilarious that some of the gaffs, there is the Scatolites' famous cover of the theme from the Guns of Navarone, that
Mm-hmm.
that film. The films had a big influence on what was done in Jamaica, because that was a big entertainment, going to a movie. So the
Right.
Guns of Navarone was a big movie, and the Scatolites did a thing of the theme. Now the theme is quite sophisticated. It's not a three-chord tune,
Mm-hmm.
it's quite sophisticated, modulates, and it goes all over the place. And when you hear them play it, you know that somebody came in with the idea. Could have been Coxsone and said, "Boy, we have to do this tune," and one of them, a couple of them would say, how does that tune go?" you know, and then somebody, one of the horn players maybe would play it, and then one of the rhythm players would sort of have heard it,
Right.
but there's pressure to make the recording. So they went ahead and did it, and man, you should listen to what it. Some stuff is going on back there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They're not quite sure how the melody goes at one point, and then the chords, guitar gone one way, bass gone a different way, and the piano is gone yet another way. Stuff.
Okay. Okay.
But having said all of that stuff is going on. It sounds great. It's great. it kind of doesn't matter,
Right, right, right.
because the beat has such a propulsion. Do you know what I've found um, very instructive? Like here we are, 60, 70 years, 60 years after the thing has this music was created.
Right.
There is video, of it, and mind you, this I saw one just a few days ago, and it was Jimmy Cliff, a very young Jimmy Cliff, singing with Byron Lee, the Byron
Okay.
Lee band, and it wasn't Scatterlights, it was the Byron Lee band. But boy, I think I understand why, how the thing's really live. It's live. I don't know. And an important component was that honking saxophone that they had playing the ska also.
Right.
One of the things that I noticed about the ska, that whole texture, you see that pa pa, the ska,
Yeah.
famous ska. Look, it was the guitar, the piano, a harmonica, and a saxophone plays. Four instruments were playing it sometimes.
Okay.
It was going
Okay.
ha 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 ha, and this is one of the things that helped to propel the thing, to propel the rhythm.
Yeah.
Make it
Right.
sound
Yeah.
so lively. If
Mm-hmm.
you check some of those live live films of live performances from the 1960s in Jamaica, you might get it. It's gritty, and it's 60s,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really live. I understand, how people could find it so exciting and thrilling.
Mm.
Now the thing is, once again, the Scatterlights came out with this thing, and it took off. And interestingly, well, it took off first of all in Jamaica, and when it took off, the guys who were organized, the big money guys, Baron Lee, Ronnie Nasrallah, Baron
Mm-hmm.
Lee, Baron Lee's band Baron Lee was a kind of, I guess you could call him sort of uptown, because
Right.
he went to a high school. He was the St. George's boy, and he would have become a whatever, one of those uptown executives or something. But instead, he,
Okay.
he did this band business, and the band business was big business. And his colleague there, Ronnie Nasrallah, was the manager, the Ronnie Nasrallah. And between the two of them, they knew, they set the business right. So the
Okay.
Scatterlights had the talent, and Baron Lee and Ronnie Nasrallah had the organization. So
Okay. Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, you see it all over the world. Somebody comes up with a good idea that starts, and the big boys just roll in and take it over. So
Right.
there
Okay.
was always some bad blood between thing, because what is it, the 1964,
Is that the World's
63
Fair?
World's Fair, right?
Right.
Jamaica had a pavilion, had a booth.
And that was Siaga taking them there, or
Yes, Sia and Siaga, and this brand new beat that is taking Jamaica by storm, and is having a lot of action outside of Jamaica. England took it up.
okay.
England discovered it, and it was called the Blue Beat there, and the ska industry started there as well. So Eddie Siaga, who was then what, Minister of Culture or something,
Yes. Yes.
he took they had Jamaica had a booth at the World's Fair, and they took ska there, and instead of taking the Scatterlights, they took Byron Lee.
So it was my understanding that the version, even including the people who were dancing, it was kind of, I mean, I don't know if this is
It
the
was
right
very
word,
much
a
an
sterilized version.
uptown, uptown brown people version, sort of a thing. A kind
Okay.
of, yeah. You see, have you ever seen the dancing? You
Yes,
know, you
I
see
see
how
two
people
different types of
dance.
dancing.
Yes, there are two different types of dancing because you're seeing this thing that looks like calisthenics. You know,
Right,
it's these exercise things. This was what Ronnie Nasrallah and his people cooked up,
right.
and I mean,
Okay.
people still use it. You know, they up down, up down, up down. You know, side to side, side to side, side to
Yes,
side. That is
yes.
uptown. What the downtown people um dance to that was legs.
Okay.
You ever seen you ever heard about them throwing legs?
Throwing, yeah, drop foot, drill
Yeah,
legs.
drop
Yes,
foot.
yes,
Yes, that's what they dance to
yeah.
scare, right?
Right.
But to be fair though, uh, probably because of the amount of exposure that Nasrallah and company, Byron Lee and company did, it those moves that they came up with were accepted, were brought into the fold. I mean,
Right.
people uptown and downtown use those movements, even though they're not really downtown movements.
How did Carlos Malcolm figure in this car?
Yeah, Carlos Malcolm was by far the I don't know, the most sophisticated of
Arranger, or
the
was he playing
yeah,
as well?
yes,
Or
he was an arranger. He's a trombone player. I never even knew
okay,
that. Carlos
okay,
Malcolm is a trombone player. But Carlos was an arranger, is an arranger, I should say. You know, Carlos lives
yes,
in California at the moment. Um, and well, to my ear, you know, there was the big, there were big band rivalries, you know. There was
okay,
Byron Lee and there was Carlos Malcolm and what was there? There were some other bands too, Vikings and a few others, quite a few others actually, and
okay.
Sonny Bradshaw and thing. But Byron Lee, you know, with the organization, and there were suspicions of other things. Byron
Okay.
Lee was always touted as the greatest band, and me in my you know early teenager years saying, but Carlos Malcolm is far superior
Yes.
to Byron Lee's band. It was way more sophisticated, and it had a lot more of the Latin component in it.
Right. Right.
Byron Lee was um, loud, you know, and I guess most people liked it loud, you know. So it worked, you know. Byron Lee worked. You have to give him that, but
Okay.
it wasn't the most sophisticated or polished thing.
But they
So
had that machinery.
It is kind of Carlos Malcolm was really a nice island or South American type of band, you know,
Okay.
sophisticated, could play a variety of music. And because ska was popular at the time, he also played ska.
I
But
see. Okay.
it's not as if he was a aficionado of ska or anything.
I see. Okay. I understand now. Okay. 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 So the transition, how what the ska now transition to, and how did that
No,
happen?
what happened? Um, well, I don't know all of the reasons, but it is said, and it's a plausible explanation that what happened is the ska tunes are somewhere between 125 and 138. You know, some of them are they're up there with the
Right.
tempo. You know, pa 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 pa, and the singers that because the ska tunes tended to be at that tempo, it restricted the type of songs the singers did, you know. And Michael, you know singers, right?
Yes.
Singers want to hold on long notes and make people love them, right? And you can't do that with a tune going at 135 BPM, you know.
Right.
So the singers, and of course, the singers sell, you know, not just instrumental music. So it is said that because the singers were limited, you know, in what they could sing, the tempo started coming down a bit. The tempo started coming up. So uh, let me see now. The even the more lively ones, let's say the toots and the metals things, um, it's you, it's you,
Right.
it's you, it's you, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's you.
It's you. Mm-hmm.
I got to say, hada, bado,
Uh,
bado, bado.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, that is, it's probably still ska tempo, but the number of songs you can do at that tempo, after a while they start to sound the same because
Right.
they're that up there. So if you think of a song like Bob Andy's "I've Got to Go Back Home,"
Mm-hmm.
right? Now that is still, ba-da, 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 that's what that's about 110,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
somewhere around there. And so all of a sudden we've come off the 130, 125 thing, and we're coming back a bit. And so this is where you started to hear, the Ken Booths, When I Fall in Love, and the Alton
Okay.
Ellis, Girl, I've Got a Date, right? And Desmond Decker, 007,
Okay.
and so that is, jing, 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 jing. That's closer to what, 100.
Right.
So gone are the 135 and upwards tunes.
But that's no longer ska.
That's why you hear people talking about transition songs,
Mm-hmm.
because the tempos were coming down. The tempos were coming down.
But it hadn't settled into a new quote
No,
unquote
no,
style.
it was
Right.
still sort of scarce, sort of, something else. But
Okay.
and then what is it? It is the first rocksteady tune, so they say, was the thing there, the Pope and Lewis thing, no? What is Take It Easy? Tick
Okay.
it ding 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 ding
Dun,
ding ding.
dun, dun.
Tick it ding ding ding
Okay.
ding ding.
Take your time. Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's Grub explained it to me one day that he actually come into the studio. You know how they did those, how the process was in the studio, was the band was there, right? And
Right.
then they'd send the singer in, and the singer would sing his song to whoever, the piano player, maybe the guitar player, and then that's how they figure out the chords.
Okay.
And then
Mm-hmm.
once you figure out the chords, you say, this is how the song goes, sing, and you
Mm-hmm.
play, accompany him, and then everybody sort of catch on. And
Figure out the
it's
parts.
during that time that the various ideas come out, and you start to
Okay.
try and put the song together. So Upton Lewis must have, he came in, and he came in with his take it down, take it down, take it down, ba 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 da. And then the next part of his song goes ba ba da dee do dee do 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 dee dee do dee. And it was he wrote the song and he couldn't manage it at scat tempo.
Right. Right.
So Lynn Tate, who was the band leader, the guitarist, Lynn Tate, Trinidadian guitar player, he was the one that said, let's slow it down. So they
Okay.
said, so it became bagadem dim doom dim dim dim. Take it down, yeah, take it down. And this is the story that goes wrong. And it's a plausible story because, and I haven't heard anybody come up with a better explanation yet. So I don't know if that, nowadays you don't know if any of this stuff is true or not. But you just know the things that sound more plausible than others, and
But Lynn Tate was also um, very instrumental in some
Lynn
iconic
Tate,
guitar sounds with
do you
that.
know that as far as I can see it, I mean, I can get in trouble with this thing, three musicians, I think, have had, let's say, a larger influence in the direction of the music than others. The music keeps evolving, and it evolves, as a result of mostly the musicians, sometimes the singers, sometimes
Okay.
the songwriters, but
Okay.
mostly it's the musicians. And three musicians: Lynn Tate, Sly Dunbar, and Clevie Brownie. I see those
Okay.
as being some of the very important things. Lynn Tate single-handed was basically rock steady,
Okay.
pretty much rock steady. Because if you listen to some of the classic rock steady, solid rock steady tunes, you find that Lynn Tate is in there playing rhythm guitar, lead guitar, and some of the fills.
Okay.
But one time, and then you find out that it's possible that it's his bass line that the bass player is playing.
Oh,
So
okay.
he was that was really his time. That was his time. And so Lynn Tate, and he came into the um, recording on the recording scene from ska, from the ska days.
Okay.
So at least no, I don't. At least he was there for the transition. I don't know. He might have come in during the scare thing for the recordings. He was probably playing live, in live bands
Okay.
for scare, and then went into recording in, somewhere in the transition. I don't know this for sure. I spoke with Andy Basford, and he spoke extensively with Lynn Tate. You know that Lynn Tate was. I mean, I wasn't fortunate to get an interview with him, but Lynn Tate had shall we say, a substantial ego.
Really?
Yes, he was, but it's not without good cause. I mean, the man contributed a whole lot to
Right.
his
Okay.
period of reggae music, and he was the sophistication side of the harmonically sophisticated part of reggae.
Okay.
Because I have a theory. I haven't written it out and articulated it yet, but I've thought about it quite a bit. And there tends to be sort of in the beginning two streams of harmonic approach to harmony in reggae. And
Okay.
one is what I call the Jamaican approach, or the Jamaican mento band approach, actually.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
other side is the Lintate side. Because
Okay.
and what it is, if by listening to a lot of things, this is my theory, is that a lot of the harmonic approach to music in those early days, that those are band people, you know is
Mm-hmm.
the approach of a mentor band. Now, a mentor band, the vast majority of pieces, the overwhelming majority of repertoire for the mentor band uses diatonic chords, because it's those kinds of songs that they play a lot.
Right.
So they and it's the traditional music turned into these attractive little pieces that people will like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And remember, I don't know, Michael, I've told you this before in other circumstances, that one of my biggest treats in Jamaica is to hear a mentor band playing what you call a big tune. One of
Yes.
those mentor bands playing My Way,
Right. Right.
or Again. This couldn't happen again. This is a once in a lifetime. You must hear them, because their chord repertoire is four chords.
Right. Yes.
And then you have Again, which is two fives all over the place. It modulates and things, and then and you hear that translated into a through four chords. So that approach. So you will find that Ken Booth's "When I Fall in Love,"
Mm-hmm.
it's a minor tune. When you listen to the harmony when they use you'll find there are no secondary dominants in there. A lot of songs from that era where you're going from C major to D.
Yeah.
um let's say you're in the key of G, let's say then. So you're going from C, which is the 4, to D, the 5.
Mm-hmm.
So in a lot of, if you're in America or England, you go C to A7, which is the 5 of the D, right? The
Right. Right.
secondary dominant, going to the D, right? So the chord progression should be C, A7, D.
Mm-hmm.
A Jamaican group from that era would play C, A minor to D, because
Mm-hmm.
A minor is the diatonic chord. That's what comes in the scale,
Right.
and they will always tend to play the diatonic chord. If it was lintate, lintate would play C, A7 to D, the secondary dominant, which is the way the Europeans and the Americans would play it.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of sophistication in the harmony you will find whenever lintate is playing in the rhythm section.
Okay.
So this is one of the things where, for instance, Desmond Decker's repertoire, discography, all of his songs, lintate played for them, in the good era,
Mm-hmm.
and it has that wit, that wit of
Right.
the sophisticated harmony, and it's not that sort of mentor man approach.
Mm-hmm.
I am not casting any aspersions at the mentor
Right. It's
approach.
just two different things. It's
It's
just
yes,
two
it's a
different
different,
approaches.
yeah.
Yeah. Let's keep it going then. I mean, because you mentioned two other people, and I want us to get to those two other people that you said that were really important
Oh,
in the
well,
development.
Sly
But
Dunbar. Sly Dunbar would be the next one. All sorts of people had influence. There is like Winston Grennan, the drummer. Who was especially significant in reggae, the real reggae, not the generic name reggae. The thing that came after rocksteady.
okay.
Winston Grennan started to gain prominence during that time, and he was a much more busy drummer
So what are some
because
of the songs he played on? Pressure Drop and Sweet and Dandy,
yes,
Monkey Man.
and what happened is that he started up the when once we got to rocksteady, the drum pattern became very simple. The hi
Okay.
hat was going click click kick 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 tick tick, and the and the kick drum and the rim click went poof one time at the same time,
It's,
and
it's
that
like what
was it.
this.
That
It's like
was
our version of a
rocksteady.
ballad.
Is click click poof click 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 poof chick chick chick
Hmm.
poof. That was all the drummers were playing. And then because by this time, I think it was time for a change, I suppose, for an evolution, and also Americans, especially the American black people, the R&B guys,
Hmm.
were complaining. Yeah, reggae is nice, but it's too slow.
Okay.
So there was an effort to try and speed it up. So what happened is that the average BPM rate went up slightly, not much. It was essentially the same tempo. But what they did is, instead of playing eighth notes on the hi hat, chit chit pa chit chit chit, they just doubled it, chit 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 pa chit 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 chit, chit. And they made the rim click got a little more busy. It wasn't
Okay.
this fixed pattern. Uh, it sort of helped, but this is one of the reasons why I think why the actual reggae period didn't last very long, because it wasn't much of a change, actually.
Okay.
It wasn't much of a change.
Well, then what did it become after that? I mean, how what changed
That's
it?
well. Let me see now. What came after that was what they call the sort of rebel music phase. That's what some people have called it. We're talking about the Dennis Brown and the Joe Gibbs stuff. And what was also happening was on the band side was Now Generation, the Chung brothers with Mikey Boo Richards on drums and Val Douglas on bass, and that became an important force in the recording studio, especially Dougie, the bass player,
Okay.
and so Dougie was another important person because that was a strong and new voice with the bass playing. I probably should mention that you had remember we said in the Scatterlights there was the band, the Scatterlights band, which was roughly um, Lloyd Nib, um, Lloyd Brevitt, Jad Jerry, Roland Alfonso, Tommy McCook, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jackie Mittoo.
Right.
Well, then in the it was in the rocksteady era and the transition. It was Jackie Jackson and Hux Brown. Jackie Jackson and Lynn Tate
Okay.
starting off, and Lynn Tate. It could have been Grennan. Grennan could have been coming in from there. Yes, Winston Grennan. I forget, but though that was a very important grouping there. That is your Desmond Decker. The Desmond Decker tunes. That's Jackie
Okay.
Jackson and
Okay.
Hux Brown and those boys. Um, and then once you got into the end of the 1960s, the 1970s, you had Now Generation, which was, as I said, Val Douglas and Mikey Chung, Jeffrey Chung, Mikey, Mikey, Mikey Richards, and Earl Lindo on the
Okay.
organ. And that was a younger people, and a sort of younger sound, and it was another voice, right?
Okay. Okay.
And that is the Dennis Brown era. That I think one of the best bass lines ever in reggae was Val Douglas. Dougie did that, and that was for Dennis Brown, Silhouettes.
Okay.
That's one of the best bass lines I've ever heard. Well, for my taste.
Okay.
Right? And that's Dougie.
Okay, we're gonna stop this episode right there because me and Peter spoke for almost 2 hours. So I have to split this up into 2 parts. So the second part will come in 2 weeks' time. All right. But thanks again for listening in. And again, I'm imploring you, share these episodes, share this episode, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and give me comments, give me your feedback, and give me like a ratings now. Thanks. All right. Until next time.